Hello, welcome to Drupal Chat. I'm Mark Isaacson and I'm the host. And today I'm talking with Lucas Hedding. We've got a bit of technical difficulties and Lucas is not able to get his video stream, but he does have his audio stream working. So I'll be on video and you'll hear Lucas on audio. Welcome to the chat, Lucas.
Well, thank you, Mark. Nice talking with you this afternoon.
And just to let you folks know, Lucas is in, I believe you're in Central America somewhere, yes?
That's true. I live in Nicaragua. I'm originally from the Midwest in the U.S., but I've moved down here 3 years ago now, and that's where I do my stuff with Drupal.
Okay, well, I think we're going to get back to that in a little bit about why it is that you happen to be in Nicaragua and exactly what you're doing there. But why don't we start out by asking, when did you start using Drupal?
It would be 5 years ago. I had my Drupalversary in July, so just a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And I did it over lunch at a Thai restaurant. I was meeting with a friend of mine because I wanted to do some exploring into this whole open source thing. And I knew he worked with some pretty interesting open source software. And he started to tell me a little bit about Drupal and did more research that evening, the next couple of weeks, and haven't really looked back since.
Nice. So if you were using Drupal at the time that you had that meeting, what were you doing when you had this lunch date with this friend who turned you on to Drupal?
Hello?
Hello? Do you need me to
Hello?
repeat it?
Did I cut out there?
I think you cut out there. I think
No, Okay. Did you catch the where or when I started?
No, I was asking
did I cut out?
You had cut out. I was asking you about what you were doing at the time that you had this lunch date with a friend before you were using Drupal.
I was working at a very large insurance company in software development, doing framework development for, there was an MVC framework that allowed them to do state-based and regionally based policy creation of insurance policies. Pretty complicated, complex, multiple hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and I wanted to do something where I could work from anywhere in the world. And Drupal, you totally can do that.
Okay. So it sounds like you were doing some type of web development.
Definitely.
It was more proprietary. Actually, I guess it might have even been totally proprietary then. It's not that you were using something like another platform, whatever the popular platforms would have been at the time, but it seems like maybe it was something that was totally developed in-house.
It was primarily in-house. It was all Java-based. I mean, there's some similarities to a lot of programming with Java. We're in the process of converting from a custom MVC framework to one that was still pretty heavily customized, but based on top of Spring.
Okay.
And Spring MVC. So it was becoming less proprietary.
Okay. All right. So you were introduced to Drupal by this person. You said you were interested. You checked it out like that night, and within the next couple of weeks, you kind of decided that you were interested in it. How did you go about connecting with the community? And I guess when did you actually really start using Drupal as something more than a curiosity or a hobby?
So that would have been in a summer. So that year, I did some hobbyist stuff. I had a friend, well, the same friend, Jason. My friend Jason said, well, here, I can give you a little small project you can work on.
Hmm.
And it was really simple. This is Drupal 7, I believe. It could have been Drupal 6, but it was to build a little pop-up alert thing when people visited your page for the first time, not the second time, and just sort of be a little advertisement notice. And so I did that for him and did some other little things and got my foot into the technology of Drupal. But then that fall I went over to Drupal Corn. It's a little camp over in Iowa that's grown a lot since then. It's very big now. I think it was only the second or third year at the time. Learned a fair amount then. Made some more connections with the community at that camp. I think there's also a Drupal camp in Chicago that winter. So I started doing some of the rounds of camps, but nothing out of the region, out of the Midwest, until I landed my first job with Drupal.
Okay.
So this was all up till now. It was just sort of stuff on the side in my spare cycles after I got off work because I was interested.
Mm-hmm. What was your first job with Drupal?
I worked with a regional hospital network out of the St. Louis area called Mercy. They've changed names now, but it was like Mercy Health Group, and they had like 19 regional hospitals across Missouri and Oklahoma and Arkansas, and all the internal. And I worked on their external site, and I was able to take some of my previous experiences with Java and my limited experiences with Drupal, walk through an interview, and be fairly open about the fact that I didn't know maybe as much as some other expert people with Drupal. But hey, I've got this fairly extensive software development background. And they bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little surprised, but they bit. And they took me. And so I did that. I started doing Drupal full time because I wanted to be able to work with software that I could work anywhere in the world. And that was my stepping stone into it, was with something fairly... someone took a chance on me.
Yeah. So I guess the thing to just make explicit here about why that wasn't an option for you before to be able to work anywhere in the world was that you were tied into that one company that, even though you said they were becoming less proprietary, I guess maybe even with the Java Spring framework, that maybe there just wasn't the same kind of job opportunities for you to be able to just pick up these remote type of freelance projects. Is that what the issue was?
I guess. I mean, there's a lot of Java developers out in the market.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes it easier for the recruiters to set their own rules. I've talked with a lot of recruiters since starting with Drupal, and I've even had a couple of them open up to me and say, hey, why can't I get any of these Drupal developers to come on site? Well, that's because there's a huge demand for Drupal developers and not as many folks that can do the work, so they get to sort of set their own rules.
Right.
And I think the culture, the community around Drupal is such that everyone does it. So to require you to be on site is not the norm. And I have a background in information security, and those folks definitely they want information security folks definitely on site because they can't have people messing with the firewalls from somewhere halfway around the globe.
Yeah.
And with Drupal, there's just a huge demand, and the culture around it is such that all the good people don't work on site.
Yeah. Okay. How did you then actually get started with the Drupal community? And I guess I should mention to people the way that I happened to ask Lucas to come onto this show is that I had met Lucas, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 Drupal cons ago, maybe. He had been working as one of the core sprint mentors at a DrupalCon. And then just this past DrupalCon that I was at, I was there actually doing it as a core sprint mentor. And so I know Lucas through his involvement in the Drupal community. How did you get involved with the community? Was it right away doing this core sprint mentoring, or was it working in the issue queues? What did you do to start plugging yourself in? I know you mentioned that you were making the rounds of Midwestern Drupal camps.
I made it to a couple of Midwestern Drupal camps. Started out working at the software company in St. Louis, and then after working with them for about half a year, explained about my vision of being able to work anywhere in the world, and they said, "Oh no, I don't think we can have you do that." So, oh, okay. So I started casting around to see what I could do, and found some other work that I could do remotely. Parted amicably with Mercy Healthcare, and then that year I decided I really needed to go to a DrupalCon. So I could get to meet more people in the community and hopefully find some more work, which I did. I found every time I go to a DrupalCon, I end up finding a little bit of more work for myself and making more connections within the community. And at that first one, it was in Portland. So that would have been, 4 years ago? I went and I was hanging out at different sessions, doing the hallway track, doing talks, and saw this thing about people helping with mentor people, helping people get into software development with Drupal. Or I don't remember what the phrase was, but something to do with mentoring. I was like, well, I like to help people. So I sat in on some of these sessions that Jess or XJM and Zendoodles and so others were doing, and got hooked. After that, started doing IRC mentoring in Pound Drupal every week, and every con since then, I've been helping out as a mentor.
Good. So,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So you jumped in pretty quickly with being involved in the community. I like to think that the best way to learn is by doing. Yeah. Well, experience is definitely the best teacher, although it could be a pretty brutal teacher too at times. So you jumped in pretty much when you saw this opportunity for mentoring, and that's how you got involved with the community. Is that pretty much how you've continued to? And I know that we were just at DrupalCon New Orleans together, and I know you were still doing stuff with the core mentoring. So is that pretty much where you still focus your involvement with the community, or have you added to it or changed it in any way?
Well, and I've hinted at it a couple of times. You mentioned it in our introduction here about living in Nicaragua. So my wife and I and our family, the reason why we wanted to get into Drupal was to do something good in the world with our time, and looking at our life experiences and our abilities, that turned into, for us, being able to move to a Central American country. We picked Nicaragua for a couple of different reasons, and now we've moved down here as a family, and while I still come to DrupalCons up in North America, a lot of my energy now is focused on growing the community in the small country of Nicaragua, which is cross-cultural and cross-language. Most of the folks, well, everyone here speaks Spanish, and they might speak English. So pretty challenging to do all this, but we're seeing some pretty good. We feel like we're having an impact on people's lives.
Okay, so talk about that some. So you said you wanted to do some good in the world, so you're there in Nicaragua working on building that community, and you're saying that you think you're starting to have some impact. So what is it that you're working to do there that's helping to improve these people's lives in Nicaragua?
Well, Nicaragua has doesn't have a lot of job opportunities. It's if you look at various lists of countries, it's on the low end economically speaking, and there's just a real lack of good opportunities for folks to work in general. And so moving here, I've been able to provide training and job opportunities for, at this point, like five developers, and I've got an intern, so six folks, and I've got several folks that pop in and out of the office on a daily or weekly basis that I'm not able to hire because I don't have work for them, and honestly, they're not ready yet, skill wise, but they're hopeful, and I'm hopeful that in the next few months or years, they'll learn enough about this interesting technology, and I'll have something for them to do. And so, just let me use just an example. There's the first folks I was able to hire happened to be married. Just happened that they were both IT majors in college. We met up, and I thought they were both good candidates. Worked with them for really about 4 to 5 months before I was even able to hire them. And that's been now about a year ago. And they've been able to save up over the last year and buy some property. And they're working on building a house on that property. Things that, mid-20s, lower 20-year-old folks in Nicaragua, that's kind of a dream come true, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's universally a dream come true, but in their case, it's really helped them out a lot. And they're both very bright, both very technically savvy. I'm hoping to reproduce that with others. Like I said, I've got 5 or 6 folks here in the office, and it's only been a year and a half or a year or so that I've actually had employees down here. But slowly but surely, their skills will get better. My skills, as far as working with other developers, not just by myself. There's a whole different thing when you're speccing out Drupal work for someone else to do.
Yeah.
But all of our work, all of our new work these days is Drupal 8. We only do it in Drupal 8. Because Drupal 7's, so 2000, so much the 2000s now.
Yeah.
I'm smiling. You can't see my video, but I'm smiling. We do a lot of Drupal 7. So.
Yeah. So how about if you maybe compare and contrast then, like your involvement with the sprints at DrupalCons with the work that you're doing, mentoring and training these people in Nicaragua?
Okay, there's actually a lot of similarities.
Okay.
When you go to a con, you show up in a room, and the internet will, within the first half hour, go away. And whenever we do our training here in Nicaragua, the internet tends to also get saturated. So we always plan for not having connectivity. Because we do global training days. That's a thing that the Drupal Association hosts every year, or every quarter of the year. And when we do these global training days for the community and we give back, we tend to not have very good internet. I think out of the 7 of these that we've hosted in the last 2 years, we've had internet one time. And that's exactly like at a con. You can't expect to have any real stable internet. The other thing at some of these trainings is you have people of all walks in life who show up, and they come with all kinds of different computers, high-end to low-end. And to be able to expect that everyone's going to be able to install a Vagrant machine and fire that thing up and running in 5 minutes is pretty ludicrous. It's laughable. And it's the same way in our trainings, because people come with their laptops that they check email with, and it's not necessarily high-powered to be able to run any virtual machine. You can get PHP and LAMP running on it, but you end up having to swap out memory limits and try to eke this thing through so you can get the install running, especially in the early days of Drupal 8, trying to get it running on some of these smaller laptops, pretty painful. So there's a lot of difficulties, a lot of similarities, I would say, in just getting folks up to speed. And that's why I'm pretty passionate right now about trying to find a solution at that can work in a con, but it can also work in some of these more remote parts of the world where they're not going to be able to use something like simply test.me or some free Pantheon or Acquia account for a training day, because you're just not going to be able to use those in Nicaragua or even in maybe sub-Saharan Africa. You got to have it local.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting point, just about the technological logistics. Talk a little bit then about like the people level, and not necessarily about, okay, these people only speak Spanish, but just about these people that when you're training them, and I don't know what their background is. You mentioned there's the 2 people, there was the married couple, they both actually had IT backgrounds. I don't know if all the people you're dealing with actually come from IT backgrounds, or in like what kind of level of education they've had before they come to you to start getting any of this training.
It's a mixture. There's some pretty qualified people, and then there's some that are less qualified. But they all come with laptops, and they all come with bright eyes. They all come with an interest. Everyone has cell phones. Everyone has mobile devices.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of internet surfing on. So the whole idea of mobile first is very, very, I mean, there's no other way to do it for them in their minds, because everything is mobile.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a fair amount. Well, yeah. So it's a wide difference, because there's such a lack of job opportunities. People will come just to see what it is, because they're not working anyways.
Yeah.
And take off a Friday, because they're not really taking off a Friday. They're just leaving their house where they don't have any work to do anyways. And so I've had lawyers, I've had high school graduates, I've had marketing majors, I've had a lot of IT staff. We're located in a large university town, so I have a lot of students that go to the local university that are majoring in IT, that will come to the training. If we go to the big city, which is the national capital up in Managua, we're talking several million up there, as opposed to here, we've only got maybe 100 or 200,000. You get a slightly different mix up in the big city, but in general, you just get a mixture of people. Some people have Drupal back. Most of it, I would say, the people that come to our global training day trainings have limited experience with Drupal and a much larger experience with either WordPress or Joomla.
Mm-hmm.
So to expose them to Drupal, I think is really good to grow the community in the country. We're looking at doing a camp this fall. The original Drupal camp in all of Central America was like 8 years ago in Nicaragua. But that's before like anyone's time. So no one really remembers it.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely wasn't here, and all the folks that I hang out with in the Drupal community in the country, that's only a vague recollection. So we're going to have a Drupal camp this fall, and hoping to attract 40 to 50 people within the country, and really see this. I think with Drupal 8 coming out, it's a game changer,
Okay.
especially when you throw in multilingual. It just works. Multilingual just works.
Yeah. So,
And in a country like this, multilingual is a big deal.
why so in that country? What's the real game changer about the fact that multilingual just works now?
Drupal 7, it doesn't work. Not without a great deal of knowledge and skills and abilities, and you're still ending up having to hack a lot of stuff to get multiple languages work. And in any Latin American country, you tend to have an expatriate community that tends to have a fair amount of money that you want to have your website in English for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then your bread and butter is the nationals. So you still need to do it in Spanish. So you go from cell phone to banking to the hotel and the hotel industry. All of them are going to need it in Spanish, definitely, because that's where they're going to get the majority of their traffic. But they would prefer to also have it in English, especially in the hotel industry. But banks as well. There's a lot of expatriates in Central America. And if you want them to bank with you, if you want them to use your telecommunication services, it'd be awful nice if you can offer up your website in English.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I don't think you get that with some of the computing marketplace products to Drupal. It just works. Drupal 8 especially. You just right click on it and say, I want to create a translation of this piece of content.
Yeah, I've looked a little bit at, I haven't started building anything in Drupal 8, but I've looked at a little bit of its features, and I have looked a little bit about the localization, the internationalization, and how things, the way that it was stored before, that you actually if we talked about a node, for instance, that you actually had two versions of the node, and so for every piece of content you had on your site, however many languages you wanted to do, it just kept multiplying out the entities there, the nodes. Whereas now, I guess in Drupal 8, they're not doing it on that level. I think it's actually field level is the way that the translations are being stored. So you actually still just have the one node ID that's being served, and it's being translated sort of, I guess, through the fields.
Yeah, it is on the field level, and you get to know which fields are translatable.
Yeah.
So if we take take a basic blog page, and you've got sort of a photo field on this thing that's sort of your promo image for the blog post, you might decide that that's only going to be one language because you're not going to come up with multiple languages for photos. So that one's always the same. But then your copy for the blog post is going to be in two languages, and so you've got field image and field or your body field, and when you go to translate it, you only translate the body. But then when you go to node 1,
Right.
and you say, I want to view it in Spanish, it's really very powerful.
Could you translate the image field? Let's say that, for instance, you had something that, let's say that you're considering, you're serving a site that goes to the United States or North America and is also served in, let's say, a country that's more like Saudi Arabia, one of the Middle Eastern countries, where maybe the image that they're going to show in the United States is something that culturally wouldn't be appropriate in Saudi America. Saudi Arabia. So is it possible to actually translate image fields so that depending on what language you're in, it'll show one image to people who are viewing the site in English and another image for people who are viewing the site in Arabic?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. And you can even translate then the alt text and the title
Right.
text.
Right. Okay. Good point.
So you can have alt and title text appropriately translated for the respective locales. And if you start going into the media space in Drupal 8, I know we're kind of probably getting off topic from your notes, but if you get into the media space, you end up dealing with a media entity at that point, and you can even, like if you start to deal with like a YouTube video as your media, your image, well, it's not an image, it's a YouTube video. You could end up serving up either different YouTube video destinations, or you can even denote back to the viewer and like subtitle it appropriately and tell it to subtitle this thing in Arabic if you wanted to. Automatically, it'll turn on that video for you, and it'll just bring up the Arabic left to right translation for the text of that video. I mean, it's at that point you're sort of starting to get over into YouTube technology too, but it wouldn't be possible unless you had a really good multilingual capability in Drupal 8.
Very interesting. Right. Yeah. Well, we're not looking to turn this into a complete tutorial in multilingual, but it certainly was worthwhile to get to hear some of that information. And I do think that you wanted to have a bit of an opportunity. We're kind of running towards the end of the interview here, and I know that you wanted to have a chance to talk a little bit about the idea. So speaking about, foreign languages and multilingual, what it's like starting up a business in a foreign country, I think is really a point that you wanted to emphasize. So what did you want to share with the guests about that?
I'll keep it brief because I don't know that everyone's going to do what I did. But it is an interesting thing. If you've exhausted all your technological challenges and you really want something new to do, and you want to stretch yourself a little bit, move to another country, try a language, and start a business. There's a lot to learn culturally and linguistically. But I think what I would probably, I'm going to say this. Learning to depend upon others is probably one of the biggest lessons. And I think that applies across the gamut. So even if you're not moving to another country, learning to depend upon helpers, like hire an administrative assistant if you're starting to get to a point where you can't do it all yourself. If your business is starting to grow to that point, or if you've got a lot of real simple front end or back end tasks that you'd really like to spend more time on more complex problems in Drupal sphere, try to line up a summer intern. It's going to help them. It's going to add back to the marketplace. Someone who's a little bit skilled with Drupal. I know someone did that kind of, not as an intern, but gave me a couple chances when I was starting out with the Drupal landscape a few years ago, and as well, here, build this little thing for me on my site. I can't really pay you for it, but hey, you'll learn a lot about Drupal. And so moving to another country, you learn to depend on a lot of people. and it's pretty rewarding though too. Whenever you try to help other people, you end up getting helped a lot yourself, and learning a lot about yourself. You know, it's hard. On a personal level, I mean, it's really hard for the family. But we're all kind of on the same page. But we have the personal side of life tends to become magnified. So if there's anything going on between the kids or between husband and wife, that just feels harder. The soft side of life can and does affect the technology. But if you didn't have that, then you're not a human, right? You're a machine. Then if you don't have emotions, then you know that you need to go. You need to figure out where your emotions are, because people get burned out working with Drupal too easily, or with working with anything where they get into it and they throw their efforts behind it. If you don't remember that you've got emotions and you need to take care of yourself and take care of your family. And I don't know, I'm rambling now, but
It's okay.
it's been good and challenging.
Yeah, well, and it is actually an interesting point that you raised about, all I know is Drupal. I don't know what it's like with any other open source communities, but I do know how getting involved in the Drupal community can really become so consuming that you can totally burden yourself out and neglect all the other areas of your life. So it's not just even whether you're starting a new business in a foreign country, it's even just what happens to some people when they get involved in the Drupal community is that they get so wrapped up in things that it just takes over their whole life to the neglect of other aspects of their life. So fair enough point to keep in mind.
And one of the when I say wanted to do something good in the world, for us as we are Christians and we come from that background, we want to be able to be involved with a local church and be able to do things both inside and out of work to just sort of have an influence for that for our beliefs. And so using Drupal, it funds me, but it also gives me an opportunity to have a day-to-day interaction with a bunch of folks. And then I get to hang out with folks on the weekends at church and have that community too. So that's what life is like living in a foreign country.
Okay. Well, then let's wrap things up here. So how long have you lived in Nicaragua now?
It'll be 3 years in November.
Okay. And so I don't know if you immediately started working on building the local community when you were out there. How long have you been working on like building the community and given some employment opportunities?
The first year I didn't do any. The first year I did nothing to build the local community.
Okay.
So 2 years of building the local community.
Okay. So how about if we just wrap up then by if you giving some forecast of what you think, what you're hoping for in the next, 2 or 3 years of continuing with this effort.
Okay. So the folks that are listening in at this, and if they happen to live down in Costa Rica, I've got friends down there now, they're going to, I look at you guys and what you're doing in Costa Rica with your camp there where you've got 300 attendees every year. And I look at you with envy. I would love to see even a portion of that audience showing up in Nicaragua for a camp. I think forecasting out in this next couple of years, if we look at our past couple of years, I think we'll see that the country of Nicaragua will produce some pretty outstanding Drupal developers. And you'll start to see folks in the issue queue that if you looked at where their nationality is from, they're powerhouses, and they're coming from this country. And I think while it is small, I think it will start to grow into probably not as big as Costa Rica. Let's be honest, but maybe 100 folks, and then in 3 years that are working with it, which is a big change from 2 years ago where we didn't even have but maybe a dozen in the whole country working with this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that goes to any of the necessarily. I don't know that even speaks about the work that I'm doing personally, because that I don't think I could accept that much praise. I think a lot of it goes back to the technology that we're dealing with here. Drupal is a really successful technology. If it was not so successful, I don't think that any effort that I did is going to make it bloom and blossom into 100 people. And I think it also speaks to the passion of the nation here. Anytime you share information with people about Drupal, they really like to share that information with other people. So, sort of like teaching people to fish, it just keeps on going.
Okay, well,
We'll see.
Yeah, I wish you much success in growing the community there, and a lot of adventure on your ongoing travels. And I appreciate you taking the time to have the chat with me today.
Well, thank you.
You are very welcome. So we'll have to maybe touch base again somewhere in the future. And until then, I guess we should say hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Adios.
Adiós.